Thanks for joining us. My name is Mariana Michael, and on behalf of Commvault, ATP Gov, and Carahsoft, I would like to welcome you to today's webcast, Do You Trust Me? The Basis of ZTA. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, please direct all of your questions to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer all of your questions. And if for some reason we do not get to your question, the Commvault team at Carahsoft will follow up with you offline after the presentation. This webcast is being recorded, and a link will be sent out in a follow-up email for you to view again and share with a colleague. So now I will tell you a little bit about Carahsoft. Carahsoft is the trusted government IT solutions provider and top GSA schedule holder, supporting an ecosystem of manufacturers, resellers, integrators, and consulting partners committed to serving the public sector. The dedicated cybersecurity and defense team at Carahsoft specializes in providing federal, state, local, and education customers with a variety of cybersecurity solutions to secure their cyber ecosystem. Our comprehensive cybersecurity portfolio of products and services can support your organization's needs in the below category. And our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to contact us for any of your needs. And for the continuing professional education, we are pleased to be offering one CPE credit to those who attend today's webinar. To qualify for the credit, you must be present, register your attendance by signing in with your full name, and actively participate in the polling questions throughout today's webinar. So for more information on CPE credits that we're offering, our CPE sponsor, NASPA, or the submission process, please visit the link on your screen. If you meet all of today's requirements, you will receive your certificate of completion within a few weeks. So now I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenters to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariana. Good afternoon. My name is Grant Wilson. I am the Director of Technology and Engineering here at ATP Gov. And so I want to say first, thank you to Carahsoft and Commvault and Richard for letting me ride shotgun on this presentation today. I will say that, my team knows I'm really excited about this Commvault relationship, and for a lot of reasons. At one point, I used to compete directly with Commvault when I managed the engineers at a company called Rubrik. For that, we were partners with Commvault when I was managing engineers at Pure Storage. And so during that whole time, I came to have a pretty strong understanding of Commvault and their capabilities. And then, moving over here to ATP Gov, I learned about their investment, the massive investment in becoming FedRAMP high certified and validated. And that just, blew me out of the water because it's such a massive investment in the space. And then, based on my background and understanding, Richard, I really knew that I believe that Commvault, was strong in some areas and not as strong in others. But, you pointed out in our conversations getting ready today, for today, that some of the recent acquisitions have just had a massive enhancement in the capabilities that Commvault is able to bring into the cyber resilience space in particular. And that blew me away and got me even more excited. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation today. And again, thank you for letting me participate.
Oh, Grant, I really appreciate those comments. And there's nothing better than to have, as I always say, it's very important to have people that are really questioning and trying to explore what a capability is. And that's what we're going to do today. So I've taken a little bit of a different approach. I'm Richard Breaker, and I'm with Commvault. I've been here for about 6 years, previous uniform military in the Army as a communications officer, and then in the Pentagon as a senior civilian with the CIO G6 and the DoD CIO. Before finishing up my public service career in DISA. So currently senior strategist for the executive security programs across the Commvault, and particularly I focus heavily on the federal sector. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So are you ready is the way I used to always start many of my presentations. And ever since I was with Commvault, I sort of said, I hear you about compliance and telling everybody about backup and da-da-da. But it's all about readiness. For the federal government, and from my background, particularly in the DoD, it was always about being ready. But for today's presentation, I'm going to start with, do you trust me? And the reason I think this is so important is it sets the stage for why zero trust architecture has become the method that the federal government, DoD, and IC are pursuing to try and greatly improve not only their agency cybersecurity, but as the executive order announced several years ago, improving the nation's national security. And we'll talk about these details as we go through the presentation. So thanks for joining me first. Thank you, Carahsoft, and thank you, ATP Gov, for being a part of our partnership team. It has been great, and really do thank you for that and look forward to throughout. Please, if you have questions, put them in the chat as Mariana put up, and we can save them to the end. And but at the same time, Mariana is going to look for, hey, wait a minute, we need something clarified, or here's a really good one. So with that, what's the logic of building trust? So one of the things that I did, I prepared this presentation that we're going to go through today, actually for an event about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right across from the Doge headquarters. Ironically enough, and our government speakers were from NIST, they were from the Department of Energy, they were from Treasury, and many other government agencies, and I wanted to engage them sort of like a TED Talk. So if you really think about it, the concept of trust is an interpersonal relationship. You know, it's not like I sit down with my computer and say, hey, computer, it's Richard today. You want to look at my fingerprints? Do you trust me as a computer device? So, but reality is, in a virtual world where I no longer see people face to face as much, you have to figure out, how are you going to validate my credentials? How do we know they're real in today's world? Am I trustworthy? Hey, do we have a common colleague? Isn't that the way we often decide whether we first will talk to somebody else? Even the language is an important critical piece, how we dress. And fundamentally, we need time. So it was so funny when I did this the last time. I sort of said, so do you trust me? You know, I had quite a bit of the audience saying, well, it sounds like no is the right answer. So agree. So let's figure out, what are you going to need to trust me? All right. Will this help? Okay. I've mentioned a little bit about my background. I'm a retired Army officer. I taught at the military academy. Hey, my first assignment, pretty interesting, pretty high level, TSSCI clearance type thing. Alternate National Military Command Center up in Raven Rock. Mentioned my background as a cyber leader in Army CIO G6 and a senior civilian in the Pentagon and at DISA. And hey, I'm married, father, grandfather, homeowner. Does any of this matter? Hey, I'm TSA pre. So all of these are interesting credentials, but don't they need some external validation maybe? This is what I'm telling you. I'm on a webinar, so that might have some echo of how you would validate trust for somebody. But these are the questions we need to start figuring out. Okay, so that's evaluating me. What about trusting an industry partner? Hey, have you ever heard of Commvault? A lot of people saying no. And then I go, well, have you heard of Microsoft? And everybody goes, well, of course. I said, hey, did you know we back up Microsoft? Yes, their our second largest revenue producing environment, Xbox, 3.5 million users globally, exabytes worth of data. We're their backup company for that. They are an angel investor for over 25 years in Commvault. So pretty good credential there, maybe. So how do you validate corporate credentials for industry, government, public, private sector? Well, it's Commvault. Here's the number one in cyber resilience for more than 25 years and counting, really heavily focused on data. It has always been about data. This is their credentials from Gartner. I mentioned the Xbox. Hey, Grant, thank you for mentioning the FedRAMP High. I led that effort here, took over 3.5 years and a significant dollar figure to get that certification completed.
Awesome.
We're less than 1% of the total people in the FedRAMP marketplace, only 1% of the offerings in the FedRAMP marketplace achieve FedRAMP High, so pretty significant.
So
Patch chart. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, though, you know, the thing for me, though, is to understand that most of our Department of Defense customers don't have the ability to enjoy the capabilities that come with a cloud-based cyber resilience capability. Right? It's just not an option until now. The Commvault offering really it means that all of those features and functions that are being developed out there in the commercial space for commercial customers that are cloud-based, you guys are bringing them into the DoD cloud, right, into the
Yep.
FedRAMP cloud and making them available to our our DoD customers in particular, who always seem to be getting the short end of the stick. So I think that's a really huge differentiator and really important.
Well, I really appreciate that. And as you say, we're already in process with the DoD IL5, for the weapon systems, command and control systems as well. We're already at the DoD IL5 for their administrative data and like their PII. For all the civilian agencies that are represented in the patch charts, we are also already IL5 compliant for them as well. So, and on the right-hand side, it talks about the patents, but also the investment. And Grant, I really do appreciate, and one of the greatest things I've enjoyed about being with the Commvault team is their investment. So we built what is called clean room recovery. So it's really interesting, and we'll talk more about how you protect data as we go along. But when you want to restore data, and you say you've had a malware attack, an adversary, as was recently announced a couple weeks ago from the Microsoft attack, wouldn't you like to make sure that the malware that was there before you reintroduce, quote unquote, your air-gapped data back into it? Well, now what Commvault did is they invested in clean room recovery. I'm going to show you another chart later in the presentation that also talks about, hey, it's not enough just to restore the data. If you've had a significant attack, you're going to have to restore your network. Do we know all the identities? Is our Active Directory available to be able to restore the network? All of these pieces and parts. And again, Commvault made an investment, bought a company named Appranix. And what Appranix does is they capture that blueprint of your network. And I'll show that to you, like I say, in a later slide. So lastly, major investment in Clumio. So again, another investment. Commvault bought a company called Clumio, and it is the largest cloud protector of the AWS S3 bucket. And so Commvault is the 8th largest data protector in AWS and the 8th largest in the Azure cloud. So, okay. We talked about some questions on validating trust of individual and organization, but the next logical question, and again, going back to the zero trust architecture, what would you trust to share with me? And what I mean by that, hey, you want to give me a full power attorney? Would you lend me $1? How about 100,000? What about your business contact info? What about your personal contact info? So next, you have to start seeing that data has a value to it that is based on what it could cost you should that data be revealed. So it is always focused on, zero trust is focused, I want to limit the exposure of a broken trust. It's like a COVID. Once it's gotten out into the system, if you have not put the brakes on it, it is very, very, very hard to pull it back in. And again, this is where zero trust architecture is being designed to help limit that exposure in a broken trust. Okay, so here are some initial takeaways based on what we've covered so far. Apologize if it covers some stuff that is sort of maybe obvious already to you, but trusting takes time. For most of us, direct experience is one of the most important aspects of creating trust. And what I mean by that, personal experience with your friends, your family, that gives you an idea of who can you trust, what can you trust them with? Will it be out on Facebook by the time you finish your sentence, or will it never come out? And then most of us, for somebody we've never met or a situation we've never met, distrust and suspicion is not a bad instinct. And the new data, so think about this, as we get new data points, that impacts trust. And again, going back to both the Appranix and this concept of clean room, you want to make sure that the latest information is available to you to ensure a dynamic credibility of trust. Fundamentally, trust, when you create trust and you share information with friends or across a virtual environment, you are creating a risk exposure. Trust equals risk. Zero trust then mean you want to get to zero risk. How do we do that? Zero risk mean you have complete air gap architecture. I bring this one up because Dave Wennergren, one of the Department of Navy CIOs from several years back, when everybody wanted this concept of zero risk, we're tired of all these attacks, he came into the presentation in the Pentagon and basically said, hey, you want it? Then we'll disconnect from the network. If you really want to ensure zero risk, the only way you're going to do that. And then they all say, well, we can't do our mission. And he said, exactly. So let's talk about the next way to do this. How do we get a way to leverage the net and yet also maintain some type of protection for ourselves? So here's the latest data on ransomware. Now, DoD in particular sort of says we don't do ransomware, but they do malware. But here's the cost that you're seeing impacting the nation whose economy is a critical part of our national security. So it's really clear to understand that when you are balancing risk, it always comes in three categories. And I always come back to this because I think it is so important to recognize. There are people, there's a process involved in an organization, and then there's technology in an organization. Risk vectors, in other words, somebody is going to attack your company. They're going to either attack through the people, the process, or the technology. They're going to find either somebody who is willing to give them credentials. They're going to attack the people. A process. Hey, you have a process where you have a swipe card to get in your building, but you don't have a second piece to put in. It's just a swipe card. That's a process issue. And then finally, the technologies are what we use, a user account, a password. And these are the things that we try and implement to try and get to a risk balance that we can accept. And then you have to sort of figure out this minimum viability, something Grant mentioned, is all about cyber resiliency. Have you identified your critical assets? Are your solutions that you're about ready to implement across all of these pieces meeting the mandates required by Zero Trust?
If I may just point out something there on this ransomware piece, because you hit on something that's really important. A lot of federal customers, they dismiss the risks of ransomware as a threat. And there's a couple things, though, that need to remember. Number one, those threats are actively, constantly evolving because the amount of money that bad actors make in that space is massive. It's in the top five. The revenue if it was compared to the GDP of nations, right? It's a massive amount of money that's coming into their possession because of ransomware, and so they're heavily involved in investing and getting better at stealing money. But there's also the fact that state actors are a real risk, right? And so for most companies, they're not necessarily a risk. But for our federal customers, especially in the landscape today, where there are nation state bad actors out there, they would love nothing better than to be able to compromise a federal agency, even if they did it, quietly, to prove their ability to harm the United States. So the risks, for the federal government aren't smaller because they don't have as much ransomware threat. It's actually larger because of the introduction of state actors and people who want to do us harm.
Absolutely. And their ransom may not be money, but their
That's right.
ransom instead is information. It's security profiles. It is, hey, how do I shut down New York City's power grid? How do I attack Washington, D.C.'s emergency information network? So you're absolutely right, Grant. And by the way, ransomware, it's a growth industry. In case you haven't recognized,
right.
It's a growth industry. All right. So, hey, before we go to this next one, I want to talk about, we've mentioned people, process, and technology. Did you realize that according to Gartner, 95% of all security issues start with people? Hey, guess what? People love to make password. That's a problem. People love to, hey, it's too hard to log on every day. So I'm going to leave myself logged on for days at a time. So when I walk in the morning, my computer, I don't have to go through all my credentialing. I don't have to wait for 5 minutes of it scanning and everything else like that. So we often do that. I've mentioned bypass procedures. It can also account. Grant and I were having a great discussion on hospitals and architecture and how, you have the automated doors so that when somebody is taking a patient through a hospital through gurneys, and you've got doorways to segregate and secure separate parts of the hospital, both from disease and also from protection of patients and also protection of staff. Well, guess what? If you get tired of waiting for the doors or the door thing is broken, what do? You put the wedge in the door. So that's a bypass procedure. Right. And notice that we use technology to sort of simplify that. Most of you now probably, if you go try in your network in government today and try to put in the word password for your password, it's going to be rejected. Technology insertion is how we're implementing zero trust. If you want to do these procedure bypasses, notice there are a lot of procedures that say they scan for activity. They look for these nation state actors. Commvault uses a capability that says, hey, if there's a new data source identified that needs to be backed up, we back it up. But if we've not had it identified, we quarantine it and say, hey, and this is, you can see this video on YouTube with the state of Colorado CIO talking about how he actually had to have the Commvault solution alert them that somebody had created a virtual server on his network from Eastern Europe. And guess what? It was somebody staging a ransomware attack, and it was an ability. So again, a procedures can really also undermine. And very rarely is it the technology. And when the technology does fail, and I did mention the fact of, we've got SolarWinds recently, you've got things like, and that's a little bit of procedure and technology. And then you also have the recent Microsoft problem again, where part of their server technology had a backdoor left on. And so there are those technology pieces that also have to look at. And this is what zero trust is really looking at. So this is really where we're going to launch into the program specifics. The rest, the initial stage setting, hopefully got you a basis. So back in 2021, President Biden signed the executive order that said we have to improve the nation's security. And by that time, NIST had already done all of the background work with both NSA. They had done the work with the DoD. They had done the work with GSA and many other nations around the world to say, how do we stop this? And so the guidelines were published in 800-207. But here are the three most important aspects of the vision for zero trust. First one, verify explicitly. And what does that mean? It means that nobody gets on your network unless they authenticate, and we will authorize them based on all available data. Notice how critical this is. Not only are you going to look at our own internal information, but you should also have sensors out in the world that are looking for maybe social media data that might tell you you have a bad actor in your group that you didn't know about. They might be an employee. They might have logical authorization to get on the network. But what about if there's a social media announcement about a threat that they just did or something like that? So if you have other resources, you want to draw on those again as well. Use least privilege access. What does that mean? That means that when Richard logs on to Commvault, he only gets what he needs to do his job. He doesn't get to see the corporate details. He may not know everybody's salary. He may not know everything that the company is about ready maybe to make a major purchase or maybe sell something. He doesn't know their stock strategy or anything else like that. So I only have the access that I need, and it should be the way with any organization. Finally, assume a breach. And what does that really mean? It means that 20 years ago, if you had a network hiccup, is the way I would describe it, meaning all of a sudden you couldn't do what you wanted to do. Your phone call didn't go through, you couldn't reach the internet. Oh, you'd say, hey, I wonder what cable got broke, or I wonder what device failed. Now the first question is it a cyber attack? And then not until you can clear, is it a cyber attack, can you then move on to any other troubleshooting? And so that's what it means. So these are the fundamentals that zero trust is trying to pursue. So hopefully these are somewhat familiar to you, but this is the basis of all zero trust and building trust securely. All right. I mentioned earlier, here is a good description. This is what I mentioned about Appranix. So if you look at this entire diagram, this is an ecosystem. This is what you have in your organization that tries to manage that most critical, precious piece of information, your data and your applications, and trying to make you operationally ready. So notice on the left-hand side, you got the identities, the endpoints. You've got actual policy description, threat protection, your cyber tools. Across the bottom, you You can see the entire experience that you're going to have. You see the arrows and the things where the data flow and the other pieces of the entire ecosystem, how they exchange information. Apologies for the dog in the background. Who knew? And so the next piece of this is that data piece to get focused on. You need not only to recover the data and all the other pieces, but this is where Appranix comes in. They actually take a snapshot of this as built. Grant, I know you had some other comments about this diagram as well.
Yeah, I love this, the ability to look at the data situation, from this view. And it's also really important to understand that, we're talking about part of Zero Trust. It's data focused and data centric, but you referenced earlier, it's the most valuable thing an organization has is their data. And so being focused on the data from a security perspective is going to yield really substantial results. And you said something earlier too that really stuck out to me too. The mentality or the approach of ensuring that everything is treated as if it's not actively being used and therefore subject to a higher level of security until it's in a position to be used. Is this the place to talk to that? Because I found that to be so relevant.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
So yeah, the idea though, historically, when we dealt with data, it's out in the operational environment all the time. And then you back up the things as part of, a requirement to protect data and ensure it doesn't get deleted for, kind of administrative purposes. And, you want to make sure the mission can continue in case there's an outage. But you secured that data differently than you secured the operational systems. And so the approach that the zero trust architecture that you're describing here at Commvault switches that around and it assumes that all the data needs to be protected at a very high level, and you only kind of check out the data for use when it's needed, and then when you're finished you kind of put it back away at a higher security state, which I think is a completely revolutionary approach to protecting your data.
So thanks, Grant. I'll foot stomp that. The whole point is exactly right. If you have a lot of data on your operational systems all the time, it means you have exposure for all that data. And like you say, the approach that Commvault took was a tiered approach and said, hey, you need operational data, maybe 90 days, 91 days. Okay, so at the 91st day, let's look at all that operational data and let's start moving that into an area that is being protected, and it reduces that immediate attack surface area that bad actors immediately go after. They go right after that operational data first. Then as data gets older, you do the same thing. You keep moving it further and further away, and you also start to air gap. You put a physical barrier where your backup data cannot be accessed through an operational network. You actually have to go through a separate network and a separate procedure to be able to get back data that has been purposely archived. So appreciate that comment. Here is the NIST standard that we follow, and many others do as well, but it is about that risk readiness and recovery. And MITRE and NIST frameworks really show you how in-depth this is. And while it looks like it's a flow pattern maybe from left to right, in reality it's interactive. What I always highlight on this slide is the concept of resilience starting before the attack. Guess what? If you try and buy insurance right as your car plows into the back of the car right in front of you because they stopped quickly for something you didn't see and you didn't have the insurance beforehand, hey, it's not going to help you now. So many cases you need to understand in every element. Planning is so critical, and you have to do it for cybersecurity because of the complexity of this past diagram. I mean, that is a complex diagram. And when you realize that within that diagram are whole patches of stuff we've not even looked at yet. Okay. So again, a great framework. It really does help you walk through how you ensure your risk profile is maintained. For Commvault, we've always, when the Zero Trust architecture was announced, it was great for us to be able to announce, hey, because of our 25-year history as a Bell Labs spinoff, our work with Microsoft, and our work across industry as engineers, we already met the requirements of the zero trust architecture. And it was simply the way we approached, and I can't say we, it was simply the way that the engineers approached building the platform over 25 years ago. They started with the concept that let's separate the storage plane from the data plane from the control plane. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to logically put in place an ability to segment and isolate issues as they occur. It allows you to introduce role-based and access control at each level as needed. It allows you to create critical indexing and metadata to allow you to be able to evaluate access based on who's trying to access. It enforces that least privilege access and just in time elevation. If Grant and I are having a conversation and we're on a document sharing platform, and I have another document and I go, oh, Grant doesn't have permission, you want to be able to go to the system and not wait days, but hopefully wait just seconds to say, I want to share this document with Grant. Here's my authority to be able to do that. Here's his access level. I'd like to elevate it to be able to do that. Your system needs to be able to do that. And that's the way architecture should work. We're always trying to figure out how we can do that in that framework. Sure, any workload, any location, cloud on-prem, recover to anywhere. And my question for you all, why didn't we start with this chart? And my point is, this chart, while a very good chart and critical to the discussion, I was trying to build trust with you, and I think trust starts with a knowledge base that I think I can relate to. Again, I started at a personal level of helping you understand trust. This now relates trust into a very specific platform and an architectural approach that shows how Commvault is already delivering this capability for data protection. Again, another view of that platform. Grant, did you have something you wanted to insert?
I love this. I really do. Because one of the things that, for going back to my experience, competing against Commvault and also doing business with Commvault as a technology partner, the handling of data for the purpose of handling data was a huge differentiator, and the ability to take this huge corpus of data that many organizations have and then move it into the cloud. You have in the conversations with the data owners and the infrastructure owners and the people who have to pay to managing all that data. But at the same time, now we can have a really in-depth conversation with the folks that own the security side of the business and who are responsible for ensuring compliance with zero trust requirements. And so you're going to create a groundswell of enthusiasm. And we're only talking about part of that. But now you get the best of both worlds. That's really the big part for me. That cloud piece was so significant previously. And it might be a little bit overshadowed today, but perhaps that's a good place for a future conversation to understand how all of those pieces work together, and an organization is able to get significantly more out of one solution than it might seem on paper.
Yeah, and I think that is funny. That's where many of our discussions go with when we went to the Pentagon. It was so funny. They had all of their backup and all their data. They wanted a full modernization platform, but they focused on their on-prem first because that's where they had a lot of classified data. Right. They had a whole bunch of data that was highly sensitive, but a critical requirement in the RFP, the request for proposal, was about you've got to be able to show us that you can go to the cloud. And what was interesting for us is we would show them an on-premise environment that we modernized along the architecture you're seeing right now. And then we would say, do you want to move this up into a cloud just as a lab test sample? And they go, yes, show us. And we literally, it's a mouse click. You create a library from the command center dashboard. And then from that dashboard, having created the library, you click the workload that is on-prem that you want to move to the cloud, and you drag it and drop it. And then everybody goes, well, what did you do? And we go, it's done. And then we open up the cloud and we show them their account that they asked us to put it in. They said, is this the workload that we just moved? And they go, and then they open it up and they go, yes. And I said, so that migration's done. And it is pretty fun because.
Right. So that conversation is all about the data. And oh, by the way, now you can just immediately check the box for the data element of zero trust.
Yep.
That you need, you're now on the hook for. Oh, by the way, you're getting those features. So I think that's kind of I think that's a great story that I definitely want to I encourage us to have conversations about in the future.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it and really looking forward to ATP Gov being a great partner with us along with Carahsoft. Again, this is another view of that same type of concept of being able to create that immutable backup. You've got AI capabilities that allow us to interact, create generative AI visions of this again, and then giving you a unified management. So again, that control plane being controlled by the ability of the individual user. Okay, architecture matters. This is sort of, we're getting down to the end to wind up. I mentioned that example I gave about the going into a hospital and having to have doors that open for somebody, the hospital staff moving a patient. Notice it's an architecture decision, not a how to do it decision. And so it's not the implementation instruction. It's saying, I have got to be able to move a patient without having to open up the doors on my own. I need something that automates the door opening. Notice you could do it a lot of different ways. It could be an optical reader. It could be a badge scan at the door. It could be a button. It could be something on the floor as the wheels hit the floor. Each of those are ways to solve architectures. And in the same way, this is the way Commvault approached engineering its data architecture. They wanted to have a resilient platform in providing maximum control to the user. They wanted a single code base regardless of whether you're on premise, in the cloud, or whatever might be there in the future. It's not a bolt-on. If we buy a company, guess what? We integrate the code. So, and again, you wanted to have that architecture that incorporated all of these elements that the previous slide also so emphasized. So again, architecture really is important in being able to meet, especially an effort to modernize, but more importantly, a modernization that doesn't get left in the dust next year by the next greatest invention, right? So, here is my my last thoughts for today. I always remind everybody, digital transformation, it's my view of the world. Guess what? In my view of the world, leaders always underestimate the risk of compromise. They do not understand how often we are under attack. They always view this as happening to somebody else. It's not happening to them. I then go back to say, hey, by the way, not only is it a high risk, but if you are compromised, that compromise will become public. And that compromise to repair will always cost more to mitigate after the breach than preventing before the incident. If we could have contained COVID at its source, how much money would this world have saved over that period of time? That's the way to look at this. And it's no different for zero trust architecture and the way we have to start looking at security. Last bullet here. Go ahead.
I tell you that, a lot of commercial organizations reasonably, I think about the risks in terms of dollars. They don't understand that, there's an extraordinary level of scrutiny when you have a cyber event, a cyber attack that is successful. And federal agencies face a different additional risk, right? They're going to get all kinds of scrutiny. There's reputational challenges or impacts that are very real and will likely happen. But also there's a level of scrutiny in the leadership, right? And there's a famous kind of quote that says, when something like this happens, you have to learn 3 sentences. And that's yes, Senator, no, Senator, and I'm sorry, Senator, I do not recall, right? Because that's also, that's who the bosses are. Those are the people that are going to come looking very closely. So the risks include dollars, loss of data, and also, having to have those very unpleasant, less than fun conversations. And something in particular with a solution like this can help alleviate. Granted, we can't keep all the bad guys out because Commvault doesn't own the network. We're not saying that. But to mitigate and reduce the impact of any bad actors inside the space and help protect the data, I think it only makes sense to be part of a holistic zero trust solution.
Well, I appreciate that, Grant. And I'll only amplify it by stating one other thing. It was funny when we got our FedRAMP High authorization, the first 10 deals that closed within the month after were all Fortune 100 companies. And our senior leadership at Commvault, when we were doing the forecast updates and everything, they said, hey, can we ask you all a question? Why the Fortune 100? And we said 2 reasons. FedRAMP High authorization has a gold seal of approval recognized across the globe and in industry. And I said, and recognize those Fortune 100 companies are regulated industry. Their banking, their health, their energy, their transportation. All of them at some point have to communicate with the federal government and exchange information. And the federal government is saying, if you want to connect to our Department of Justice system and get information on a local citizen in your state to see if they have an issue, you're going to do that on a FedRAMP High system. You're not going to do it any other way. So last comment I think is evident, but it is funny. If the security is too hard, people will always default to their personal convenience. So you do have to recognize as you implement solutions, your architecture matters to also make sure that you account for people and process in that architectural solution. All right. So you're ready to trust me and Grant? Are you ready to trust Commvault and ATP Gov? So with that, I thank you for your listening time. I appreciate all the comments, Grant. I really do cannot thank you enough for how well you helped support throughout, and look forward to any questions that might be out there, Marianne. Thank you.
So again, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Grant. We really appreciate you speaking with us today. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Q&A. And I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please use that Q&A pod at the bottom of your screen. So let me go ahead and pull up this first question. Can you explain further why architecture is so important to implementing this modernization effort?
Absolutely. So I come back to that architecture really is the way that you maintain a lot of resiliency for what you don't know is going to go and come forward in the next evolution of technology or next evolution of our society. So think about when you were all of a sudden there as a software provider in a brick and stick company, and there was one in the 80s that did this, and they made a big investment in all the mall stores. And the very next day, everything became, you're going to download software, you're going to download your app. You're no longer going to go to the brick and stick store. That's an architectural decision. So what we're going to constantly emphasize is how critical that is to our ability to not only implement an immediate solution, but the architecture allows you to create a foundation that allows you to modernize. You have to think of a way to move forward as a critical piece. You don't want to be limited. Commvault, when they started working with cloud service providers, they said, hey, we want to be able to do it natively. So what we did is we worked with these cloud service providers from an architectural perspective and said, how do we not have to add on any more equipment or devices or anything? We just want to be able to put code in place. So think of how the decision to use code as an architectural way of solving a problem versus a device. Notice how much simpler it becomes when you use code to update something versus having to get a device and buy it, replace it, get it installed, test out the new device, make sure you have the power compatibility for it, make sure you have the air cooling, air handling for an upgrade. So that is why I would say architecture matters so much. I'll turn it back to Grant. I know he's got ideas on this one.
I do, and it's a great question. It's an interesting question. So, I go back to the old adage of the optometrist who, had a prescription that worked for him, but every time he tried to use that prescription for somebody else, it almost invariably never worked because a solution needs to be tailored to the individual organization, and you simply can't just, you can't have a functional, effective, cyber resilient, zero trust, validated, accredited solution that doesn't take into account the specifics of your organization. It really has to be tailored. And we're talking about something very complicated. You need to be very deliberate in how you craft that solution to ensure you meet or exceed all of your security requirements, address your sensitive data. And so it has to go through that process in order to give you the confidence that you are truly resilient and give you that peace of mind so you can sleep at night.
Great comments. Thank you. It was a great question. I agree 100%.
So let's move right into the next one. With the importance of ZTA, why has it taken so long to launch this program?
So I'll take a first swag at it, and then I'm going to let Grant jump in again. For me, zero trust architecture actually has been working in the background for years. And what I mean by that, there was an old approach called ITIL, and it was a sort of a best business practice for ITIL. And when you really think about some of the fundamentals of the data pillar for zero trust, it's like, do you know where all your data is? Do you know the type of data you have? Do you know the data owner? I mean, these are not like we didn't know to do this. It's just that we needed to make sure and had some type of enforcement of the architectural system. So to me, the architecture in the background has been developing for many years. NSA and industry have actually been working very heavily to get this architecture really tested and tried and sort of armor plated a little bit. But the implementation also requires you can't have certain legacy systems that don't allow you to have, like, again, the hospital door analogy. If I don't have a pressure plate, if I don't have an optical scanner, if I don't have an automated motor to open and close the door, I can't implement the solution until I get there. Grant?
Yeah. So again, I like the question because, to Richard's point, that we've been talking about security for a very long time. Certain parts of the federal government took it very seriously. Some others maybe took it less seriously. I would say I would point to the rise of ransomware and the dollars that ransomware has been costing organizations, particularly commercial organizations. And in that process, it overwhelmingly incentivized bad actors to identify weaknesses in cybersecurity and to exploit them in an effort to make money. And so all of this attention, time, and dollars, and the rapid acceleration of the capabilities for cyber attacks, particularly ransomware, but others as well, really drove home, I think, to a lot of people that they assumed things like, security through obscurity. People didn't know, so they didn't care. Well, now they care. They're incentivized by dollars. And so I think that was a major driving factor behind taking, the concept of cybersecurity and driving it into this concept of zero trust, which I think most of us who understand IT have been kind of proponents for a very, very long time.
No, I think those are all really, really strong points too, Grant. I mean, as we said, it's not like technology and architecture hasn't been improving our ecosystem, but as you've mentioned all along, it's not like the adversary and the ransomware haven't been using that same technology to improve their advantages in the space as well.
All right, so next question, does ZTA have any application to my personal computing?
Grant, I'm going to let you take the first shot at this one.
It does. I think yes, right? And so it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't take their cybersecurity, their own personal cybersecurity, as seriously as perhaps they should. We are all potentially at risk. And the same way that large commercial organizations have seen a massive spike in ransomware, so have individuals. And so, if as you're going down this path, I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look at, their and their family's IT footprint, the technology they're using, and the risks associated with them, and the consequences, and kind of mimic, micro versus macro in their own world, in their own space, the exact same subjects, concerns, and how to mitigate them, and taking the procedures, et cetera. So yes, 100%.
Yeah, and I'll just emphasize the fact that the industry has recognized this as well. You'll actually find a lot of industry providers in the cyber protection space actually offer an individual capability to allow people to take advantage of it. There are a lot of what we call multi-factor authentication systems that involve what are called hard tokens. Many of you are familiar with either your CAT card or a PIV card, or maybe something called like a YubiKey or a token or a fob device. All of these are systems that are being integrated into the zero trust architecture for organizations in the federal government, but they're equally available for private citizens too. And they are enormously providing enormous security ability. The use of VPN architecture on your home devices, where you get a very, very low price, again, VPN subscription, where you can actually hide your personal network and your home network and mask it from the internet. So I would agree with Grant. Absolutely critical. You absolutely can bring these concepts directly to your own home. And there are people there out there to help you do that as well.
Awesome. Okay, well, I am not seeing any more questions in the chat, so I can just go ahead and step into our closing now if you guys don't have any more final thoughts.
Grant, I'll turn you over to you for your closing thought first, and then I'll share what I've got.
I don't have a lot. I really appreciate everybody's time today, and I particularly appreciate Carahsoft and Commvault for letting us participate. I think this is a completely an extremely relevant conversation for our customers, and I think that helping people understand who don't think and do cybersecurity regularly, understanding zero trust and putting it into context makes a lot of sense. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Grant. And so I guess I want to emphasize that too. I appreciate ATP Gov, and I appreciate Carahsoft and the entire portfolio of Carahsoft partners that both ATP Gov and Commvault work with. I guess I just want to emphasize, don't do it alone. Number one, ask for help. There are people that have already gone through this process and worked through a lot of bugs. Avoid a person that comes in and says they can do it all. Avoid a company that says they can come and do it all. It takes a partnership. It really does. Find a group of an industry team that has learned to work together. Somebody that does identity management, somebody that does network management, someone that does data management, and then find maybe that systems integrator that can bind and pull these capabilities together and offer solutions, not just piecemeal trying to give you new technology and trying to drop it off and say good luck with that, but actually help you there with the work effort to implement. Zero trust architecture can be done, and it can be done logically, easily, and there are probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that we think you can take advantage of right away. But again, reach out to experts, reach out to independents. Look at the Gartner studies, find out what they're saying about the world. Look at Gigamon and look at Forrester, look at other places, and look at other agencies that might have already begun their journey and find out what they've experienced, what they can do to get better, what they can do to get worse.
Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and give our closing announcements. First of all, I mean, Carahsoft, as you know, we can't do anything without partnerships. So we truly value our partnerships. So thank you again, Grant and Richard, for your time and expertise today. I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. We hope you found this webcast informative and helpful to you and your organization. So if you all could just please take a moment to answer the survey that's going to pop up at the end of the presentation. We would appreciate your feedback there as well. For those who met our CPE requirements today, you will receive a certificate of completion within a few weeks. And if you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us. You can contact our Commvault team at Carahsoft at commvault@carahsoft.com. And finally, you'll receive a follow-up email within the next few days with an archived version of the webcast, so you can review that or pass it along to a colleague. So again, thanks so much for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. And thanks again to Grant and Richard.
Hey, thanks, Mariana. Thanks, Grant. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for your time and attention today. Really enjoyed it. Okay. Hope you like the approach. Like I say, a little bit different approach in introducing the subject. So thank you.